let's talk about my all-new FL5 Type R. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to be talking about my brand new 2023 FL5 Type R. It's been just about 2 weeks since I made the purchase and I took her home from Los Angeles. That was a long day, and I've already taken steps to do what I can to get this beautiful car protected. So since I bought it, I've been driving it daily. I also got tint done. Windows are down right now so you can't see it. But clear bra is done all in the front and paint protection all the way through. I will be ceramic coating it here in a couple of days. But I wanted to go over with you, now that I've had a few days to drive it, and talk to you about my initial thoughts on the FL5. Coming from a 2018 FK8, and having driven that substantially and a lot on track, I feel so far that there's a lot of positive improvements I'm seeing in the FL5. My initial feeling is that Honda was listening. Honda was listening to all of the little issues that FK8 track goers were having on track, and I don't want to say they fixed it because that's yet to be seen, and we are going to find out, believe me, but they at least acknowledged what the challenges were and they took steps to improve it. Another thing to note is looks. Now, looks are always going to be subjective, and I will be the first to admit that I absolutely loved my FK8 Type R when I had it. It was super aggressive. A lot of people felt like it was overstyled, but really, the more and more you modded, the more aero you put on that car, it just looked meaner and meaner, and it was, quite frankly, badass looking. The FL5, through pictures anyways, for me was very underwhelming. And I get the feeling that's what the community generally feels like too. But what I cannot convey to you through the camera is just how beautiful this car is in person. It's got an incredibly wide stance, and that's not just cosmetic, it actually is functional. We will go into that in just a minute here. But talking on the looks, it is definitely more mature. That's a word that's getting thrown around a lot, but that's also something that Honda listened to too, right? There were a lot of critics out there saying that the FK8 was overstyled. The FK8 community loves their FK8. They love the way that it looks, and I loved mine too. It's not necessarily a good thing that they smoothed out the looks on the FL5, but I think it's something that you can appreciate when you get to see the car in person. And I tend to believe that the aftermarket will, get it to look more aggressive with additional aero and other bits and pieces that you can add onto the car. So I'm not overly worried about that. To me, it kind of feels like the FK8, you were already starting with a painting that was vibrant and full of color, and you were just adding to it, versus the FL5 being a blank canvas and you can make it your own, which is actually pretty exciting. So now I'm gonna go into some of the speculation out there on the FK8 versus the FL5. There was a great video put out by Throttle House. I'm sure all of you have seen it by now. Shout out to them. They always do a fantastic job on their car reviews, of the FK8 doing a drag race against an FL5. Well, in summation, if you haven't seen that video, go watch it. But basically, spoiler alert, from a dig, the FL5 is quicker. Once you're rolling, then the FK8 starts to catch up. And just from a pure roll, the FK8 will actually pull ahead of the FL5. Now, the FL5 has more horsepower. It's up about 15 horsepower on paper versus the FK8. I have a feeling it's a lot more than that. And I'm gonna get the car dynoed so we can get a good base number, but it feels more like a 20 to 25 horsepower bump, and torque as well. Now, that might lend you to think, okay, how is it possible that the FK8 is still pulling away from this car if it's got more power, right? And even if this power is understated, how is that happening? Well, it boils all down to gearing. So the gearing is longer in the FL5. It's arguable that they did that for a couple of different reasons. Longer gearing can be better on certain racetracks. It can lead to better lap times because you're having to do less shifting. You can stay in a gear longer instead of hitting the rev limiter and having to shift to the next gear. Things like that all cost time on lap times. So if you have longer gearing and you can make up for it with a little more torque and a little more power, that can usually lead to better lap times. Now, I know a lot of you are, I'll say this, okay? Most of you know by now that I also have an A90 Supra. Absolutely love the car. But what cracks me up about the Type R community is how much time they spend talking about the FK8 and how much faster it was from a roll than the new FL5. Guys, I'm here to tell you, this is not a roll racer's car, okay? If you're looking to roll race or even drag race, stop buying the Type R, okay? That's not what it's for. That's not what they engineered this car for, all right? They engineered this car to turn laps and carry the heritage of the Type R badge, which has always been about racing, right? Not about street racing or roll racing or any of that stuff. If you guys want to roll race, go get a Supra. if you want to drag race, go get a Supra. I mean, there's not really much on the road that is going to beat a Supra, especially with, you know, a few power mods, a few overnight parts from Japan, and it will decimate all. So anyways, not to harp on that fact, I just wanted to point it out because that's definitely a point of discussion in the community. Let's now talk about the differences chassis-wise on the FL5 and feature-wise on the FL5 versus the FK8. So just to point out some of the more cosmetic changes. So the new FL5 has a Bose stereo system, fantastic. I don't really listen to a whole lot of music in my car, but they do sound great. Ambient lighting, now that's a little bit of a tease because it's only one color. It is red, which is, you know, harkens back to the Type R heritage, which is all great, but you know, one color, you know, I feel like they could have given us more colors or more choices. You know, give the consumer more customization, right? Blind spot monitoring, didn't have that on the previous gen. One of my favorite changes, temps for everything right on the dashboard. So you have oil pressure, you have coolant temp, you have oil temp. That is fantastic because that's something that you could only get in the aftermarket on the FK8, and it was a pain in the booty to do it. Most people didn't even bother with it. Even once you did it, you usually only had oil temp. If anything, you didn't really have oil pressure. So the fact that Honda addressed that in this new FL5 tells me that they're not only serious about making this a car that is very trackable, but they also listened to the critics and they at least touched on the issues that we were talking about. Wireless charging. Now I know, I think it was 2019 and up, the FK8 had available wireless charging. Correct me if I'm wrong, but now it's just in the car. Adaptive cruise control. So that's something that came along later in the FK8. I believe it was 2020 and up. Adaptive cruise control was available on the FK8. Now it's just there on the FL5, and it's the newest generation and it works fantastic. It certainly helped me for my drive back from LA. I use it every single day because I use this car to commute. It's a lifesaver. Metal pedals. So just now we're going to go into the overall nicer materials in the car, but now you have metal pedals for the clutch, the brake, the accelerator. Much less plastic on the interior, the A-pillars for the center stack and the radio. Everything looks nicer in there. There's much more soft touch. The dashboard itself is soft touch. The armrests are soft touch. There's a lot more refinement on the interior than there was on the FK8. Nothing wrong with the FK8. Again, everything was pretty solid in that car. Nothing really rattled too much unless you started modifying it, of course. But stock for stock, the FL5 is a much more refined car. One of the biggest critical factors of the FK8 that a lot of people kind of complained about were the fake vents. No more fake vents, guys. That is so, I mean, and that's part of the reason why the looks of the FL5 cleaned up, is because there are no more fake vents. So no more fake vents in the front. That's a real diffuser in the back, which you guys saw in the B-roll there. The overall aerodynamics of the new FL5 looks quite a bit more tidy and practical now. Not so much boy racer and not so much Gundam wing left foot. I mean, it's more subtle, but it's all functional, which I can definitely get behind. One of my favorite features, individual mode. Yes, now you can select what engine mode you want to be in, how you want your steering wheel to feel, while independently switching the suspension to comfort and turning the dials to Type R. I mean, it's fantastic. Individual mode is a game changer, and what I love about it is a lot of other manufacturers that have individual mode, which drives me nuts, it usually defaults back to the standard mode when you turn the car off and turn the car back on. In this car, it stays in individual mode. When you turn the car back on, it goes right back into individual, and it's great. Absolutely great. Now, if I'm gonna nitpick, and I am gonna nitpick, you cannot turn traction control all the way off in individual mode. Honda, if you're listening, please change that, okay? Because if they can allow us to turn traction control all the way off, now on track you would be able to use comfort mode suspension as a softer track suspension setting, and sport as a medium setting, and then plus R as the hardest setting you can get. Not all tracks you're going to want the full plus R suspension. It's in a lot of cases it might be too hard, especially now since they made changes to the suspension. They made it stiffer, and we'll go into that in just a second as well. But Honda, if you're listening, please make individual mode so you can turn the traction control all the way off. If there is a super secret pedal dance thing that I got to do to secretly turn it off, that's fine. Let me know, please. That would be an amazing thing for the track. Other updates to the transmission, so not only just longer gears, or it's basically longer final drive, but new shift linkage. So one of the inherent problems on the FK8 was grinding in second gear. When the transmission got really warm, there was fourth gear lockout. That might still be present, okay? The fourth gear lockout might still be present. Dai Yoshihara tracked a stock FL5 at Button Willow, and then they took it off the track. They modified it a little bit with some spoon goodies, which is awesome, and then he took it back out. But on the stock run, on the very last part of the straight of the lap, he missed fourth gear. Now, I don't know if it's because it temporarily locked him out because the transmission was getting hot. Surely it was. But I don't know if that's a carryover from the previous gen. It might have just been a misshift. So who knows? We will find out. We'll definitely find out. But maybe the difference in the shift linkage will help with the second gear grind. So far, the shifter feels fantastic. It actually does feel more confidence inspiring versus the FK8 right out of the box. It doesn't feel as crunchy. It definitely feels, it still feels precise, but there's not that notchiness that you had in the FK8. Another thing that Honda addressed is in the engine bay, there's now more space. So that is a function of the car getting longer and wider. More on that in just a second. But basically there's more room in the engine bay, more room for cooling, larger radiator, beefier radiator fan. I mean, these are all things that needed to be addressed in the FK8. We tried our best in the aftermarket to do it. It's really tough to do it with off-the-shelf materials. Hopefully, we are at least at a better starting point on the FL5, overheating-wise, than the FK8. Brand new turbo. I did notice that almost right away. It's a little bit less laggy. The car, as a result of it being wider, also has bigger fender wells. So you can run a wider tire inside of the car. Now, I'm not sure how much wider. We're gonna find that out too. From the factory, you now have two 65/30/19 wheels, down from 20 inches, which is great. I really wish it would have gone all the way down to 18, but hey, you can only ask for so much. But starting at 265 width, where the previous generation started at 245, you might be able to fit a 275, maybe even a 285? I don't know. I've got a set of 275 wide tires sitting in my garage right now. All I can say is we're gonna find out, guys. So here now we're gonna talk about the chassis changes that went into the Type R that you're not really going to notice or feel on the street. You're not really going to get a sense of it, I believe, until you get it out on track and turn some laps. But wheelbase has increased by 36 millimeters. Width in the front, track width in the front has gone up by 25 millimeters and 19 millimeters in the rear. Guys, that's big. That's a massive change. I mean, that's a lot of additional mechanical grip. And stability at high speed is where the longer wheelbase comes in. Lighter flywheel, so no more rev hang. It's easier to heel toe because the pedal placement is better. If you guys remember on my FK8, I actually put an Acuity pedal spacer to get the pedals a little bit closer together because they were just too far apart to really heel toe rev match. They've addressed that in this car. The pedals are closer right from the factory, and it definitely makes it easier to manually rev match, although the automatic rev matching feature is still there. Larger diameter two-piece brake discs. So the 2020 and 2021 FK8, I believe, went to two-piece. I believe that the discs are a larger diameter on the FL5, which makes sense because it is a little bit of a heavier car, not by much, but it is definitely a little bit heavier. They've stiffened the rear part of the chassis by 15%. By stiffening the rear of the chassis, you're going to allow the car to rotate more. Stiffer bushings in the suspension. So bushings are something that I change on my FK8 as well. Not a lot of people are going to do that mod, but that by and large is probably the biggest reason for why this car feels stiffer. Bushings make a big difference, and I'm glad that they did it from the factory. The car does have less roll in all suspension modes. Comfort mode, sport mode, plus R, all less roll. I mean, the FK8 didn't have a lot of roll to begin with, but this is definitely a lot flatter going through turns, even in comfort mode. So I think it just allows for a bigger range of adjustability in the shocks, which they have also added. So there's a larger range of adjustability. They adjust themselves on the fly within a range that they programmed into the shocks electronically. But you also have comfort, sport, plus R. Comfort, I would say now, just from a day-to-day driving standpoint, feels like sport did in the FK8. It's about that level of firmness. Still tolerable. I think most people drove their FK8 in sport mode anyways. So that's basically the feeling you're going to get in the comfort mode here. But the difference is, just from what I'm feeling, I feel like in comfort mode, suspension-wise in this car, you could absolutely track in that mode. And I think you might even want to track in comfort suspension mode, depending on the track and how bumpy it is. And that, in a nutshell, guys, is my initial assessment on the FL5 Type R. I am elated. I am absolutely elated that I now own this car. I just want to take, again, another moment to thank those of you who have been with me for a while. Because you've stuck with me for this long, believe me, there's going to be more FL5 content for you. And everybody else that's joining me, thank you so much. If you haven't already, please hit the like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about the new FL5 Type R. That's it for today's video, guys. Until next time, stay hungry, stay fast, stay tuned. I'm Michael Baxi, and I'm out.
Okay, I've been working like 3 jobs. Probably why I never see ya. Probably why I never have time for the fake friends that won't be ya. Oh God, I've been running now. Up early when the sun is out. Not setting out my own soul, but those real ones, they coming out. Oh look who's reaching out. Old friends wanna feature.